Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the horror mystery films from 2025, titled The Surrender. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie opens with a terrifying scene of a grotesquely disfigured human devouring the flesh of a dead body. The scene then cuts to a quiet suburban home, where a woman named Megan looks deeply distressed. She leaves the house, and lets out an anguished scream, before finally calming herself with a cigarette. Some time later, she returns home and chats with her old mother, Barbara, who also appears incredibly tense. Megan urges her to take a nap and promises that she'll take care of things. Afterward, Megan heads to see her dad, Robert, who is very sick and bedridden. She begins cleaning up the dirty floor when she notices a pouch hidden under the bed, so she curiously opens it, but her face twists in shock as she finds it filled with human teeth. Not long after, Robert suddenly wakes up and desperately calls out for Barbara. An alarmed Megan rushes to her mother and quickly brings her to the room. Robert is weeping in pain, so Barbara hurriedly administers half of his prescribed dose of morphine. The drug begins to take effect, prompting the old man to calm down and peacefully fall asleep. Barbara then notices the pouch with human teeth discarded in the trash and gets upset. She quickly retrieves it and says it's something she had brought to help cure Robert. This infuriates Megan, who can't believe her mother would believe in such voodoo stuff, but Barbara remains firm in her belief, and reveals that it was recommended by her yoga instructor, Deb. In the next scene, a nurse arrives to check on Robert, and inquires if he's taking his medications. Barbara responds yes, and admits she's giving him only half the prescribed dose of morphine each time. But the nurse urges her not to withhold the medicine anymore, since the old man is clearly in pain. Later, as the nurse is leaving the house, she pulls Megan aside and claims she believes Barbara is deliberately withholding Robert's morphine dose, because she wants to feel needed. Megan claims her father constantly calls out for her mother, but the nurse counters that he wouldn't if he wasn't in pain. Meanwhile, Barbara is sitting beside Robert, painfully plucking strands of hair from her head. Afterward, Megan approaches her mother, and notices how exhausted and worn down she looks. She suggests that Barbara take a break for the night, and go out to dinner with her friends. Barbara refuses, and worries that something might happen to her husband if she's not there. But Megan promises to take care of him, so Barbara reluctantly agrees to Megan's request, realizing she truly needs the break. That evening, we see Barbara sitting alone in her car in the neighborhood, rather than going out to dinner and having fun. She braids strands of her torn hair into a necklace that looks like a protective charm. Meanwhile, at home, Megan is taking care of her dad, when he suddenly wakes up and begins calling out for Barbara in pain. A worried Megan checks his schedule on a sheet, and realizes it's not yet time for his morphine dose. She considers calling her mother, but decides not to disturb her. So, she takes matters into her own hands, and gives her father the morphine to ease his suffering. At this moment, the movie flashes back to Megan's childhood, where she noticed a bird die and felt sad. Her father comforted her, saying death is inevitable for everyone, and that's what makes life so special. The little girl was worried that her parents would also die, but Robert reassured her that as long as she remembered and loved them, they would never truly leave. In the present, Megan is in the bathroom, and when she returns, Barbara has come home. Megan reveals she has already given Robert morphine, which instantly scares Barbara. The mother admits that she had just given him his scheduled dose when Megan was in the bathroom. Tension rises as the two women begin to worry about what might happen. Megan suggests rushing him to the hospital, but Barbara reveals he is on the DNR list, which means he chose to die peacefully without medical intervention. The worried women then decide to stay by Robert's side all night to keep constant watch on him. Sadly, the next morning, Megan awakens to find her father dead, his mouth and eyes wide open in a haunting stare. She immediately wakes her mother and delivers the bad news. However, Barbara is not shaken, and instead handles the situation calmly. After gently closing Robert's mouth, the mother and daughter break down in tears. In the afternoon, Megan hears her mother informing someone of the devastating news. But as she approaches, Barbara quickly walks away and shuts herself in a room, as if she doesn't want her daughter to overhear the conversation. Afterward, A confused Megan asks who her mother was speaking to, but Barbara dodges the question, and instead insists they need to keep Robert's body fresh until tomorrow to prevent decomposition. Megan wonders why, but her mother refuses to give any clear answer. After relentless questioning, Barbara shockingly reveals that Deb recommended a man who claims he can bring Robert back through a resurrection ritual. This news horrifies Megan, and she can't believe Barbara would fall for something so outrageous. Megan reminds her how she's always stood by her mother's odd beliefs, but this is batshit crazy. Despite this, Barbara stands firm in her decision, leaving Megan helpless. Later, a stressed Megan steps outside, right when she sees a vision of her father, who speaks to her. He reminds her how stubborn her mother is, and that she'll do it anyway even if Megan disapproves. He encourages Megan to play along for Barbara's peace of mind, as the resurrection isn't going to work anyway. Megan thinks it over, and realizes he has a point. With this, she tells Barbara she's willing to support her, making the old woman very happy. Barbara then explains that they must follow a detailed list of instructions she received. Their first task is to clear out the study room, where the ritual will take place, and then fill it with flickering candles and incense. The next steps involve gathering all of Robert's precious belongings, and burning them in a fire. During this, Megan picks up a childhood photo of her father and her wearing a dance costume. Barbara reveals that Megan was once a talented dancer, but Robert forced her to give it up. This surprises Megan, who has no recollection of the incident, and doesn't believe her father was like that. Barbara explains that Robert was a flawed person, who only showed his worst side to her. But she claims she has no regrets about their marriage, because he also had some good sides. After saying this, she urges Megan to let go of the photo, which pains the latter deeply. However, as her mother's insistence grows, poor Megan has no choice but to give it up. The next evening, as they wait for the shaman, Megan's anxiety grows, and she tells her mother they still can back out. But this enrages Barbara, who accuses her of abandoning her father during his battle with cancer, and only returning when it was too late. She claims Megan didn't want to face her sick dad and chose to leave home. However, Megan fiercely denies it, and insists she left home because of her mother's controlling and toxic behavior. Just then, they hear a knock at the door, and realize the shaman for the resurrection ritual has arrived. Barbara opens it to reveal an old, bearded man dressed in a hat and coat. He gives off a creepy vibe, and oddly sniffs Megan, before turning to inspect Barbara. Afterward, Barbara leads him to the room filled with incense and candles where the ritual will take place. The man sits down, and Barbara hands him a bag, which confuses the hell out of Megan. To begin the ritual, the mother and daughter begin cleaning up Robert, and Barbara places a bead made from her hair around his neck. Next, the shaman draws a circle filled with strange symbols, after which the mother and daughter struggle to carry and place Robert inside it. The shaman then pulls back the cloth covering the lifeless man, leaving Robert completely naked. After this, he opens the bag Barbara gave him, which turns out to be full of money. This enrages Megan, who pulls her mom aside for a private conversation. She demands to know how much money was spent, and Barbara surprisingly reveals she used their entire life's savings for this. Megan is furious, wondering how they will survive even if her dad comes back. But Barbara firmly insists that nothing matters now except resurrecting Robert, and she's ready to pay any price for it. Having had enough, Megan declares to her father's vision that she can't take this any longer and proceeds to leave, but he warns her not to abandon her mother alone with that creepy man. He urges her to take care of Barbara, reminding her that she has no one else but Megan right now. Realizing this, Megan heads to the ritual room, but notices all the money from the bag is gone. The shaman probably burned it as well. After all, the wealth belonged to Robert and could not stay. The mother urges Megan to sit in the ritual circle, with her father's corpse at its center. The shaman then seals the circle using the ashes of Robert's burnt belongings. Barbara reveals that the circle is meant to protect them, and they must not step out of it until the ritual is complete. They have to follow the shaman's instructions exactly, or things can go sideways. The first surrender was burning Robert's belongings, and the second surrender will transport them to the other side. There, they'll summon Robert's spirit back into his body, while the third surrender will bring them back home. Megan doesn't understand any of it, but she has no choice except to go along with what her mother says. The scene then cuts to a flashback of Megan's childhood, surprisingly showing how controlling Robert was toward his wife. He constantly dictated what she was allowed to wear, never supported her career, and forced her to stay at home to look after Megan. Barbara had to give up her ambitions, friends, and small joys, all because her husband disapproved. Little Megan loved dancing, and although her mom was supportive of her, Robert made her quit to take up chess instead. In the present, the shaman prepares for the second surrender, and gives something to eat to the mother and daughter. As soon as Megan takes it, her vision starts to blur and dizziness kicks in. She panics and claims that she can't feel her legs, but Barbara tells her to stay quiet. Then, in a terrifying twist, the shaman begins chopping off one of Barbara's fingers. Megan attempts to intervene, but she is completely paralyzed and powerless to do anything. Following this, the shaman turns to Megan and she begs him desperately not to do this.
Please stop!
Later, the creepy man uses both of their blood to carve eerie markings onto the dead body. Megan is left overwhelmed with dread and horror, as she had no idea the ritual would be so brutal. For the next step, the shaman starts chanting strange phrases, and the mother and daughter must repeat after him. Here, the charms around the room begin to tremble, and a piercing beam of white light shines down on them, right before everything goes black. And then, when Barbara and Megan relight the candles, they find themselves in the netherworld, a realm where spirits and souls inhabit dead people. Moreover, Robert's corpse and the shaman have gone. But moments later, the two are shocked when they finally spot the shaman, his face half consumed by something grotesque. Just then, an unseen creature drags him into the darkness and devours him. A worried Barbara wonders what went wrong, since the circle was meant to protect them. But Megan reluctantly reveals the photograph of herself and her father, which they were supposed to burn. And then all of a sudden,
Burn it.
Hearing the horrifying sound, Megan has no other choice but to burn the picture. Right after, she sees her father's vision again, but this time, he softly says goodbye before vanishing. The two then desperately look for Robert's body, and finally spot him in the distance. However, he is revived in a grotesque demonic form and is devouring the shaman's corpse like an animal. They also notice a pair of clawed hands protruding from inside his body. Megan immediately realizes it's not her dad anymore, but Barbara refuses to accept the truth. She is adamant that if they can entice him back into the circle, they can still bring him home. Scared, Megan begs her mom to leave, but the latter reveals she has no idea how to get back home. The desperate woman then calls for her husband, but he doesn't show any concern. In a frantic attempt, Barbara slits her wrist. As a result, this finally lures Robert near, but he still doesn't step inside the circle. Barbara tries to go close to him, but this turns out to be a fatal mistake.
Robert!
He drags her out of the circle, and devours her in seconds, leaving Megan crying helplessly for her mother. Now, Megan is left all alone, with no idea how to return home. She spends her time staggering inside the circle, trembling and begging God for help. She can hear the devil's chilling laughter, and blood-curdling screams echoing in the distance, driving her further into terror. At one point, she notices a group of dead humans walking around her, moving like zombies. Megan desperately begs them for help, but they ignore her pleas and walk away from there. Moments later, Megan recalls how her mom said that the third surrender would bring them home. She thus grabs a knife, and swallows the drug given by the shaman earlier. Up next, she brutally chops off another finger while screaming out in agony. But despite this brutal sacrifice, nothing happens. And so, a desperate Megan reaches for her other hand and cuts off one more finger, only to discover that it was all in vain. At this point, Megan is trying to compose herself, right when she notices a wooden board within the circle. She removes the board with some struggles, and is relieved to see a room on the other side. Megan is filled with hope, and after removing a few more boards, she finally manages to get back home, ending the nightmare at last. But unfortunately, her hope turns to terror as Megan realizes she has been transported back in time, and witnesses her childhood from a new perspective. She finally sees how controlling her dad truly was behind her, as he forced her mom to give up her career and studies. She had always thought her father was supportive and generous, but it turned out to be completely false. Megan also discovers how Robert stopped her from dancing, and made her switch to chess because he looked down on dancers. Her mother was the only one who supported her and struggled alone all those years, which fills Megan with guilt. In the next scene, we see Megan passed out in the circle, and it turns out she never left the place and was just hallucinating. She wakes up and notices Barbara approaching, who now appears strange and zombie-like. Despite knowing it's not her mom anymore, she speaks to her and scolds her for forcing her into this nightmare, and then dying on her. She claims that she always had a perfect image of both of her parents, which turned out to be false. Megan calls her mother selfish and stubborn, but she also admits that she loves her, and apologizes for not saying it enough. At this point, Megan finally decides to accept her loss, and tearfully tells her mother goodbye. In a shocking twist, she blows off the ashes surrounding her and breaks the protective circle, causing a blinding beam of light to shine down on her once again, probably a sign that her third surrender is complete, allowing her to return home. In the end, we can assume that breaking of the circle can be considered as a third surrender, because it shows the individual within is willing to give up their life, with the third step requiring an even greater commitment than the second surrender to finalize the process. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.